Welcome back to the New World Playbook. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your support helps us grow and bring you more stories from history that matter. Now let's dive into today's topic, the colonization of Australia. Imagine a vast land, rich with culture and traditions going back over 65,000 years, suddenly declared empty by newcomers from across the seas, a land where hundreds of nations thrived, speaking hundreds of languages, living in harmony with their environment, only to face an invasion that would change everything forever. This is the story of Australia's colonization, a story of survival, conflict, displacement, and resilience. Long before Europeans arrived, Australia was already home to the world's oldest continuous cultures. Archaeologists have found evidence of Aboriginal peoples living there for at least 65,000 years. These communities had complex social systems, hundreds of languages, and a deep spiritual connection to the land, expressed through the idea of country, a belief that people, animals, plants, and the land itself are all interconnected. They managed the environment sustainably, using practices like fire stick farming to clear vegetation and encourage new growth. They built trade networks that stretched across the continent, sharing tools, food, and even ceremonial objects. Far from being empty, Australia was alive with thriving societies and cultures. But change was coming. In 1606, Dutch navigator Willem Janszoon made the first recorded European landing on Australian soil. Over the next century and a half, Dutch, French, and British sailors charted parts of the coast. The turning point came in 1770, when Captain James Cook sailed along the east coast, mapped the land, and claimed it for Britain. He called it New South Wales. Importantly, Cook described the land as terra nullius, meaning land belonging to no one. That phrase would allow Britain to ignore the presence of Aboriginal peoples altogether. In the late 1700s, Britain had another problem. Its prisons were overflowing, and after losing the American colonies, it needed somewhere new to send convicts. The answer became Australia. In 1788, the first fleet set sail, 11 ships carrying around 1,400 people, over 700 of them convicts. Led by Captain Arthur Phillip, they landed at Botany Bay, then moved to Port Jackson, the site of modern-day Sydney. The early years were tough. The soil was difficult, food was scarce, and the settlers lacked farming experience. Yet slowly, the colony grew. More convicts and free settlers arrived, and farms, roads, and buildings were built. Australia was no longer just a distant outpost. It was becoming part of Britain's empire. In the decades that followed, new colonies were founded. Tasmania in 1803, Western Australia in 1829, South Australia in 1836, Victoria in 1851, and Queensland in 1859. Each grew rapidly, driven by farming, sheep grazing, and later the gold rushes of the 1850s, which brought migrants from all over the world. But for Indigenous peoples, colonization was devastating. They were driven off their lands without treaties or negotiations. Violence erupted across the frontiers, and massacres took place. Diseases like smallpox spread quickly, wiping out whole communities. Sacred sites were destroyed, languages and traditions were disrupted, and families were torn apart. Later, government policies forcibly removed Aboriginal children from their families, what we now call the stolen generations. Yet Indigenous peoples resisted. They fought in frontier wars, preserved cultural traditions, and continued to assert their connection to land and sovereignty. Despite immense suffering, their resilience kept cultures alive. For the settlers, life was also demanding. Convicts endured harsh punishments, but played a key role in building infrastructure. Free settlers came seeking opportunity, and the discovery of gold changed everything, creating bustling towns and a multicultural society. Over time, a new identity began to form, one that was distinct from Britain. By the late 1800s, the colonies were prosperous but divided, each with its own government and laws. But the idea of a united Australia grew stronger. On January 1st, 1901, the 6 colonies joined together to form the Commonwealth of Australia, a federation under the British Crown, but with its own parliament and constitution. The legacy of colonization remains powerful. For many Australians, it laid the foundation of modern society, its cities, institutions, and economy. But for Indigenous peoples, it meant centuries of dispossession, violence, and struggle. The legal fiction of terra nullius remained in place until 1992, when the historic Mabo decision finally recognized that Indigenous Australians had lived on and cared for the land long before British arrival. The colonization of Australia is not just a story of ships and settlements. It is also a story of survival and resilience. It reminds us of the strength of the world's oldest living cultures and the importance of recognizing their place in the nation's past, present, and future. As we reflect on this history, it's important to remember both the achievements and the injustices. Only by facing the full truth of colonization can Australia move forward toward reconciliation and a more inclusive future. Thank you for joining me on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the new Wordplay Book for more stories that bring the past to life. And let us know in the comments, what part of Australia's colonization history stood out the most to you? Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring the stories that shape our world.